Atlanta University, for me, it was mind-boggling to learn the story of how, some almost 1,000 artists over a period of generation sending his works from all over the place, and there's all this activity going on. So that drew my ADD attention. I went down that road, and I'm barely pulling myself out right now. Trying to sign off on the story, and this, so there'll be a book about that story that will be released in the spring. And then I can maybe move back to singing.
So a book about what's the book?
The Atlanta University, the history of the collection and how it came to pass, how it came to be, Hale Woodruff. I'm most excited, I'm most interested, I find fascinating the argument, the contentious argument that occurred between Bearden. Woodruff retracted after he launched the exhibitions in the early 40s. Then he decided that it shouldn't be for all just black artists. And he tried to retract along with Bearden, and it was a group of them that, they wanted the administration to change. And the administration said, okay, all right, well, we'll ask the artists to participate and send out a survey. So they did all of that. They came back, no, we would not like to open up the shows. And so there was this argument about the pros, the cons of why we should, why we shouldn't. And that's all part of the appendix in, the story. But when you get to see what came from that, the idea that it was predominantly white jurors up until the last year when it was all African American jurors. There's this all interesting dynamics that are going on in our race relations, as they are today, exactly as they are today. But I think it's in that story.
I'm just curious, how did they pick the jurors?
Well, good question. And some of that I can't really answer without, the papers, but I do know that there was a British person, Honora McNiven, who was responsible for organizing that exhibition every year. And, to no small, every time I think about the idea, this is pre-slides, people sending slides and whatnot, people were sending their artwork from all over the country to be looked at, judged, accepted or rejected, most of which was rejected. I can't even fathom unpacking, crating, and then sending everything back. So, she was probably doing most of the selection of the juries within a certain period of time. Relative to when she came and when, I'm sure there was a gap between the time when she came and when Woodruff left. Because Woodruff left in, 44. He was after, up at university. So, but the letters, I decided to include the letters in the appendix, which I think are real juicy.
So is this a collection that was at Clark or the collection that was at AU?
Very good question. Now that we're one institution, it is, of course, it was acquired on the AU side. That's where the end.
Repeat the question.
The question is, thank you. The ways and meaning of making art, a discussion of various artistic disciplines and approaches to creating art that engages the general public or a specific community. And so if I were to put that in context, how it engages the public and the specific community, the background first, the background, and then moving forward, how some of my experiences have been specifically about the community. But again, I echo an environment from which I came, family members involved in the aesthetics, essentially the sewing, hair, beauty salons, photography, painting, aunts and uncles, on my maternal and paternal side, although I didn't know on the paternal side at the time. So I came from an environment, and then, I also I give credit to the school system in which I was in, because they really pushed us going to museums. I took courses at Brooklyn Museum, Pratt Institute, all of this in my junior high school years. Then I went off into dance performing. I always wanted to be a performer. So I went off into performing back into the visual arts, high school of music and art, school of visual arts, Atlanta. I'm in Atlanta. And then at the Neighborhood Arts Center, but let me first say this, but in New York, at the Brooklyn Museum in Art Education, engaging with the community, learning and teaching different methods of art that I really didn't, well, I went to a formal college, Western Art Institute, School of Visual Arts. So I majored in sculpture and in painting. But in these places where I was dealing with the communities, we were dealing with more, what would you call it? Indigenous forms of art using, textile methods and that kind of thing. So I sort of moved into that territory, and I brought it with me to Atlanta, so that when I was employed at the Neighborhood Arts Center back in the 70s, I took the position that people can really learn these techniques and use them to improve their lives around them, because as in Africa and other societies, people are creating for many different reasons that have not necessarily anything to do with art for art's sake. I mean, that's just a basic, I think, Western concept for the most part. But so that's how kind of I moved into dealing with the community. And then as my personal work goes, I feel like it just ran off track. And when I say ran off track, I mean that getting involved in arts administration, but also recognizing that I have other interests that are constantly pulling at me, and I want to get them all done, and I can't do them all. I'm told now that that's ADD. I wish I had known 50 years ago, I may have been able to control it better. But, but I have this urge to do these various things, and they really are big and very strong within me. And so that when I was in school, at the School of Visual Arts, one of my concerns, because artists there were basically creating, staying focused and using one medium and producing these series of works. And I was very nervous about whether I was going to get my degree, because I couldn't work like that. I had developed the whole thing about crocheting certain forms, and then I had shoes going on, and then I had carved in limestone, and I had these other things going on, and painting. I was all over the place, and I did not know whether they were going to recognize, accept the things that I had created as part of my portfolio. Fortunately for me, they did. But it stays with, and my position now is, trying to work with medium processes that get whatever message I have across. The batik thing ended up sticking. I don't know how, because I was working with it. I didn't do batik until I was teaching it at the Neighborhood Arts Center, and then somehow the thing ended up being part of my